Uncle from TacticalGamer.com here. This is another tutorial for the Scripting Basics series, video 3. We're going to be talking about the locality of variables. You can see on my outline here that I've redone the planned points for this video lesson, and I've been adding it on to the Scripting Basics series that I'll be getting to later on. Okay, so we are going to be talking about variable names, different local variables, global variables, what is something called scope, how to initialize variables, a little bit about, the difference between servers and clients, and some types of events that happen between them, and then talk about public variables. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. First of all, variable names. There is a bunch of, let's see, new window. When we go to the scripting commands list, okay, all of these scripting commands, basically you could make a variable name out of anything you want, but it can't be anything that is already a scripting command or a variable within the game. So for instance, if I wanted to create a variable and I was storing something about, I don't know, the fog in the game, okay, if I go Control F and then just do a quick search, I see that fog is a name that's already used by the game. Okay, so that obviously if I made a variable named fog, then I would be asking the game to return the current value of the fog in the range of 0 to 1. Okay, so fog is basically it's a scripting command, but it's kind of like a variable already set up within the game. For example, here I am. Okay, my cursor's going nuts on me here. Wonder if there we go. Okay, so if I were to go to the debug console right within the editor, okay, and clear out my existing stuff, if I were to put fog in the watch, I get a value of 0. Okay, the set fog command, you give a time frame, set fog, and then a new value, so I'll set it the maximum. Okay, and in 0 seconds it set the fog to be equal to 1, and I can see in my watch now fog is 1. So obviously I would need to create a variable, something like current fog, okay, and that variable has not been used. Mission start. Okay, mission start already is an array that's storing something by the game, so that you wouldn't be able to use a variable called mission start. That's oftentimes the reason why I've used something like mission beginning, right? Because nothing is stored by the game already in mission beginning. Okay, so that's a little bit about variable names. All right, and let's get back. We're going to talk about local variables. Local variables also are named with an underscore in the front of them. If I were to, let's say, we're going to run a script here. I've got a radio trigger that I set up here, and I just put some text in it that said execute script. It's a radio alpha trigger. It's repeatable. The condition is this, which is kind of a variable that's on this object, which is the trigger named radio alpha trigger. The conditions kind of are that radio alpha was triggered by a player and it's repeatable. So that's the only condition. So when this is true, then it's going to execute a script called script.sqf. Simple enough. Let's go back to my mission folder, and here I'm going to create a new script. I'm just going to name it script.sqf, and let's open that up. So let's start off by creating a variable, a local variable, and I'm going to name it anything. Some new variable. Let's make it equal to 20. then let's just, for giggles here, I'm going to create an if-then statement. If some new variable is greater than 10, then, and then it's going to execute, if that were true, the code that's in these curly brackets in here. So as long as some new variable is greater than 10, returns true. If true, then let's say we're going to do a hint. Hint some new variable is greater. Okay, so simple enough. What this is going to show is that I've created a local variable. What I mean now by local variable is that when you put this on the front of a variable name, you're making it local to only this script. So this variable will initialize and be equal to 20. We can get its return and then evaluate it to being greater than 10 and issue a hint. Okay, and then the script stops and some new variable is not available to any other script, to any other trigger, to any other object on my computer whatsoever. Okay, when I execute this, it's going to be executed if it's in a well, we'll get to multiplayer later. Anywho, let's try this out, and I want to then come back and adjust it and try it out again. So okay, so simple enough. I'm going to go 0, 0, and then I've got my radio trigger execute script, and I get the hint, some new variable is greater than 10. Cool. Okay, simple enough. Let's head back over. Let's look at our outline here. We talked about variable names. We talked a little bit about local variables. What is a global variable? Well, what I mean about that variable not being available to anything else, if I were to put in my watch now, some new variable, you will see that I do not get any kind of return. Okay, because it's local to that script, it's not available to anything else. Okay, now let's go back and let's create another one, and we'll make a global variable. Let's do a side chat on this. So just finish that up. Whoop. Okay, save it, and then I should get the hint for the local, some new variable, and I should get a side chat message about the global variable, and it should be equal to 30. Okay, let's get back into the simulation. All right, run the radio trigger again. Okay, good. Now I've got the hint, and I've got some global variable is greater than 10. And if I put that into my watch, now it should be available because a global variable is accessible then to any script, to any object, anything that's on my computer, on my client, actually in my game. So some global, and it is. Okay, so local variables are really useful because let's say I wanted to have a script that would run on many different objects, and let's just say test that object and see whether or not that object was close to another object. Okay, but I was going to be doing this in a multiplayer context where there was maybe 100 objects or even 20 objects that I was going to be running this script on. When I run a script on each one of those objects, because this variable is local, I'm not worried about, let's say if I'd used a global variable, then if I had two instances of the script running at the same time, I'd be overwriting the value that one script was setting, some global variable, and then the result I might get out of that script would be an error or in error. So local variables are very useful for being able to run multiple versions of a script, you know, with different objects, that sort of thing. So now let's get back to our plan, okay? And I want to demonstrate something about scope, and this is really important on our local variables. Okay, so I'm going to forget about some global variable. As a matter of fact, I'm going to initialize it so that we get rid of it. Some global variable equal to nil. Alright, just because it's stored in my memory currently and I just want to get rid of it. Okay, so let's do something different, that instead of doing the hint directly, let's do something different. I'm going to create here another new local variable. I'm going to call it some local string is equal to some new variable is most certainly greater than 10. Okay, so all I'm doing here, and it's another way of writing this out is to make it a little more readable, is to do this. Okay, so that here is the condition, and then the code is just between the curly brackets here, and I can indent it so that if I had multiple lines, it would be easy for me to see what's happening as a result of this if-then statement. Anyway, regardless, so now I've gotten some local string, which was never initialized outside of the scope of this block of code. What this means that because I created a new local variable within the scope of this code, it's local to this block, to this if-then statement. I could refer to some local string anywhere if I had multiple lines of code here. Okay, if I had, you know, sleep, whatever, 20, and then anything. After that, I could refer to some local string again, and it would return this string to me. However, what I want to demonstrate is that it's not available outside of the scope of this if-then statement. So if I were to go down here, hint some local string, what I should get is a script error shown on my screen. And I want to bring your attention to something else. If you launch your game while you're editing, go to Parameters and All Parameters. Scroll down to the Author section, okay, and make sure Show Script Errors is checked, because when your scripts do throw those errors, you do want to see them. Okay, they can come from your triggers, from your scripts, anything, but it's going to display a message on the screen. That's what we're going to see. So let's save this up, give it a run, and let's see if we can see our script error. So 0, 0, 1, and there it is. There's an undefined variable in expression, some local string. Now we understand why we're seeing that. Okay, because some local string was initialized within here, that's fine. But then when I refer to it down here, and my script error would have been line 10, right? Or line 9? Yes, line 9. And it all makes sense now, because I initialized it and then referred to it outside of the scope that it was created, so it doesn't even exist. It says, I don't know what you're trying to ask me for, buddy. So let's say if I just up here had, and if I do it properly, I'm going to declare my local variables, so private, as private to this script. Okay, and because I've got more than one, well, first I'll just do the one that I really need, some local string. Okay, and then I would initialize it properly by setting it to be a string. Some local string is equal to, and then just an empty string. Now I would be good. You can see though I've got another private variable, local variable here that I've been using, so I might as well do them both. So I'm going to create an array to make it easy to initialize all these as private. So some new variable. Alright, now this should not return an error. Okay, so 0, 0, 1. There we go. No script error. I've properly initialized my variables, so now, because I initialized some local string in the scope of the entire script, okay, I can refer to it in, I don't know, subblocks or whatever they call this here. But it is still available to me outside of this if-then statement because it was initialized outside of it. So that's scope. Back to our plan. So we've talked about scope, we've talked about initialization. Okay, now this next part is very simple. I've talked about it a lot, and that is public variables. Okay, so back, I've restored an earlier version of this script. Let me walk you through it real quick because it's going to demonstrate the public variables. Okay, basically I added a line to the beginning of the script. So if, and the exclamation mark is not. If not is server. So if this, whatever computer is running this script, okay, is not the server, it's going to exit the script with this code, which is hint, you are not the server. And that is all that you will see. Now, it's going to then, it's declared that some stored string is private, that it's going to be a string. That copy of some stored string as a global variable is going to be a string, and that some variable is equal to 20. So if some variable is greater than 10, then a local variable, some stored string, is going to equal, this is to show that some variable is greater than 10. Okay, and then after that, it's going to copy that string into a global variable so that we can take something that is local, and we're going to get it ready to go out globally and eventually publicly. So some stored string is going to be stored inside something called copy of some stored string. Okay, so let's do a quick in-game demonstration of what I get when I run this locally. So again, 0, 0, 1, nothing, right? Because what happened was, it got to this line, it was fine. Ah, yeah, there's no output on here. Right, so the output I need to get from the debug menu, and what was it again? Copy of some stored string. Copy of some stored string. Okay, so I do have my string there. Okay, now let me pack this up, throw it on a dedicated server, see what kind of result we get. Okay, so I've got it set up. I've logged into a dedicated server. It's telling me I'm missing CVA, which is fine. And what I need to do is 0, 0, 1, and the result is you are not the server. Okay, so what has happened is I've run this. Okay, this trigger, a radio alpha trigger, is going to trigger when I trigger it. It's going to actually, it's important to understand all of this stuff, because when I activate a radio alpha trigger, it's not like an add action. It's the radio alpha is kind of interesting because then it is going to be an event, because that trigger exists in the mission. When I activate the trigger as a player, for every connected client who has that trigger, the trigger's been activated, right? Because the trigger's part of the mission. Everybody's got it. So then it's going to execute this script locally on every single machine. So every machine is going to be running this script locally. So it's important to understand that. So if I were to put player side chat something in here, every single player is going to see a side chat message as if they had typed it, because player on each one of those machines is the player that's sitting at that keyboard. Anyway, so what happened then is that we created a local variable to the script, and it was equal to this, and then copy of some stored string as a global variable that was stored that. So can I get copy of some stored string in my debug? No. Okay. Remember when I ran this locally that I did get the string returned, because it only executed on the server. The global variable is only available to all the scripts and all the objects and everything in the mission on the server itself. Has global access to it. Okay, but I don't. Okay, now let me go back, and then if I add one more line, public variable, copy of some stored, holy cow. Okay, basically I'm saying now take that variable, that global variable, and then broadcast it. When you make a variable public, it's basically sending it to the server, in the sense that it's saying to the server, here's a variable, here's the value that it is, and it's important for every connected client to know this now and into the future. What that means is when you create a public variable, I'm not just broadcasting copy of some stored string is equal to the string we set it to every connected client, but it's also going to save it so that when another player joins the server 5 minutes from now, it says, okay, here's where all the objects are in the game, here's where the bullets are flying and what direction they're going, here's all the events we're monitoring, whatever. And it's saying also there's a string called copy of some stored string, and here's its value. It's important that you know this. So you'll get it in the future for join in progress players that join in the future. Okay, so let me just pack this one up and get it up in the server and show you the difference. Okay, and now we've got it loaded up on the server, and 001, you are not the server. Bring up the debug console, and copy of some stored string has been given to me. Okay, so now we understand how to send a public variable. Whenever I needed to change the string and send that to everybody else, you change the string, okay, change its value, and then public variable again, because when you use the public variable command, it's going to say, okay, now this value needs to be sent to everybody and updated for everybody. So you change the value, then you declare it public. That's how that works. All right, so that's Uncle from tacticalgamer.com. A quick once over on some basic stuff on variables. I hope you find it useful. Give me a like, subscribe, give me suggestions. Let me know if I've got something wrong, please. And there we go. Good luck. Take care.